Hope this video finds you well. We are going to build this simple GUI interface using tkinter, but what we're going to do is we're going to build it using a class structure and use this as an opportunity to understand what a class structure is, why it's useful, and kind of to set some good foundations for later on. If you have no experience with tkinter, this is the best place to start because I'm going to assume there's some knowledge here as I put this together. Just so you know, linked in this video is an example of this exact same project but built without a class structure. And with that, let's dive in. We see that we have three labels here. We have three text areas and a login button. They don't do anything right now. That will be stage 2. We'll make some functionality. And what I want to do is I want to start off by building what's called the class that's going to define this window or this project. So I'm just going to pop into Sublime Text here and let's talk about, well, what is a class? A class is a blueprint that is used to make objects. And this is the most basic definition of a class and object. You know, I often talk to students about if someone asks you about what's the difference, you say a class is a blueprint, an object is an instance of the class. So what we're going to do is write the code to make instructions to make that window. And to start off with, we're going to build this class. So a class always starts like this. We say class, and then we put the name of the class, and then open close braces. And then we have three things when we think about a class. We want to think about what are called fields, and these are sometimes called attributes. So these are the different variables that we use to describe the object. You know, really simply, imagine the object was a cylinder. You might need an integer for radius. You might need an integer for height. What are the different variables you need to describe that object you're creating? You're going to have what are called constructors. Constructors are special methods called when we first create an instance. So these are special methods that we call, that run, that do all the work to set things up. And the third thing we have are methods or behaviors. And these are special methods that are associated with the objects that will cause something to happen. Often these methods will access or change the fields. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the constructor. And in Python, we have a really standard constructor form. And it looks like this. Def underscore underscore init underscore underscore self. And all I'm going to do is print building app and save this. So this line has to be in every class that you define. This is a special method that is invoked when the object is first created. And so let's talk about what that means to create an object. So I'm just going to save this now, and I'm going to come into here, and I'm going to run it, and just make sure we understand what happens here. So I'm going to say Python 3, actually I can just call my old line, and this is vid. So if I run this, nothing happens. Well, the reason nothing happens is because I'm building the instructions to build this app as class, but I haven't actually created an object yet with it. And what I do is simply this, is I say A is equal to APP. And what this does is this will create an app object and store the reference in A. So essentially, as my program continues, if I want to grab any information about this app object, I use this variable A, and it will tell me where it is. And so if I save this now, and now I run this again, you'll see building an app. Now, we haven't done anything yet with this, but that's what we're going to do now. So let's go back into here. So what has to happen in here? So essentially, I'm going to build my GUI here, just like I would in my other example, but I'm going to make all of the variables what are called instance variables. And what this means is that every time I create an instance of this app, I get a new copy of those variables. So if we take this basic app that I want to build, and this was kind of a drawing I made, we have our three labels, we have our three text areas, and we have our login button. And we kind of get a lay of the land. So I'm going to use grid setup, and we know that we have our row and our column. And the orange dot indicates when I have to actually put a widget there, and this arrow shows me that I'm going to have a column span of 2. So this kind of gives the layout of what we want to build. The first thing we're going to build is the root window, which is the window that has the maximize, minimize button. And then we're going to put a frame in there, and we're going to put all the widgets on the frame. So if I come back to here, so the first thing you do is build the root window. Now, if we weren't building with class structures, we would do this. Root equals tk.tk. And I'm going to have a bit of an error here because now I want to access the tkinter module, but I haven't imported it. So I'm going to import tkinter as tk. You'll find a lot of examples don't do this as tk, but I really like to do this when I'm working with students because it really clarifies that this function tk is inside the tk module. So I always know when I'm using something from the tkinter module, pardon me, not the tk module. Now the other thing you might notice is that tk is spelled with a capital T, app is a capital A. This tells me capitalized methods are constructors. So anytime you see a capitalized method, you're actually invoking a constructor to build an object. And what's the object that we're building here is the main window, right? Here's our window with the close, the minimize, the maximize. And that's how I would do this. And then I hit enter a couple times. I say root.main loop. And that's how I would do this if I was just building this with a standard tkinter, no class structure. And so let's see what happens if I try and run this now. If I try and run it, I get my window. And it works fine. But what we want to do, what we want to do is we want to make these fields, or we're going to call instance variables. Right now, the way we have them defined in there, and you can see them in the background there, they are variables that are just defined inside the constructor. We want to make a special type of variable called an instance variable that can be used throughout the whole class. And to do that, we put the word self in front of that. And that's it. So all our variables that we want to build, we want to make them instance variables, so we put the word self dot. And so now if I save this and run this, it works exactly the same, but this is going to provide some added flexibility with how we use these later on. So essentially, I'm going to build the exact same tkinter interface like I would usually, but all of the variables are going to have the word self in front of them. So let's do that. So I'm going to come back into here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to put my frame, so I'm going to say self.frame equals tk.frame. Again, notice I'm accessing the tkinter module. I am constructing a frame object. And then I want to say, where am I going to put this? I'm going to put this in the root. I have to put self.root because I want to refer to that root window. And I'm going to make a pad x of 20. I'm going to make a pad y of 20. And I'm going to set this nice background color, which I like. I'm going to set these last two parameters, which I won't type out for now. I'll just paste them in. I want to make that my background color. Again, a little bit of a pro tip here is always, let's zoom out a bit here, always set your colors with hexadecimals. You get a much more nuanced, nicer look, and use some sort of built-in color scheme designer. And then I'm going to set the relief to be sunken. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the frame. I'm going to add the frame to the actual main window. So what I do is I say self.frame.pack. And again, you can ignore the word self, and you'll notice this works exactly the same like if you were building a window in a usual tkinter setup. But now these are now what are called instance variables. All right, so we'll just save this. I'm going to run this just to make sure I have everything right. And I like doing this because it catches me when I make a mistake. So I have an invalid syntax there. I always recommend regularly running your program to see if you've made a mistake. And I have an extra brace. That's all. So let's save that. Let's come back to here. Give this a run. I'm sure some of you saw that. And what happens now is our window is super small when you load it. And that's because the frame has no content yet, and tkinter is going to make its best guess for size. And it says, you have no content, so I'm just going to crush you down to nothing. Okay, so let's X that out. Let's just clear up this window, and let's go back into here. All right. So now let's build the rest of it. So the first thing I want to build are the labels. I'll type the first one, but the other ones I'm going to actually just paste in. So I'm going to say self.lab1, label1 equals tk.label. So I'm going to go into the tkinter module. I'm going to access the label constructor and build a label widget. And I'm going to say self.frame because I'm going to put that in the frame. I'm going to say the text is equal to enter first name. Remember, there are two types of parameters we think about. We think about ordered parameters where the order matters. So in this case, the window that I'm going to put this widget in has to be the first parameter. And then we think of named parameters where the order doesn't matter, but we know exactly what to do with it based on the name here. And one of the things you do when you work with tkinter is you go in and you regularly look up the different name parameters that make sense. So I'm going to set the text to that. I'm going to set the width to 30, meaning 30 pixels. 30 characters. I'm going to set the height to 1, meaning one line. I'm going to set the border width equal to 2, and I'm going to set the relief equal tk.groove. And I think I want to set one more thing in here if I remember correctly. I believe I want to set the actual the actual foreground color, which is the text color. So let me just copy this from somewhere else so I get it right. And there's my foreground color. So let's just review this line. I'm going to make an instance variable called lab1, meaning it's accessible throughout the entire class, and each instance will get its own version. I'm going to construct that using the label constructor, which is inside the tkinter module, where the first parameter has to be the widget that I'm going to place it in. So in this case, I'm going to place the frame. I'm going to place this widget inside the frame, and then I'm going to place the frame inside the root window. And then I have some name parameters. Text tells me the text that it's going to be. Width gives me the width of this object. The number of characters. Height tells me how high it is. Border width will give me the border width. And the relief is tk.groove. And the foreground is this color. Let's just take a second and break this down again. Notice how it says tk.groove. That means that groove is a constant inside the tkinter module that tells the relief how to work. And I spelt relief wrong there. So let's save this now. Let's run this. Oh. There we go. And it's not there. Well, hopefully you've picked up the reason that it's not in our window yet is because we haven't actually put it in there. So let's come back to our grid. We see that we want to put it in row 0, column 0, and we want no row or column span. So we're going to come back into our code here. And I like to construct all of them, and then I like to pack them. So I'm going to come down here a little bit, and I'm going to say self.letLabel1.grid. I'm going to put it to row 0, column 0. And I'm going to save this, and I'm going to give this a run. And there's our text. Now you'll notice that in this case, I've given this all of these types of information. And actually what I've done is I'm copying this off the screen and I read the wrong one, but that's okay. I want to make this look like my original one, so I'm going to come and clean this up a bit. I'm going to get rid of, in here, I don't want any relief on this. I don't know why I did this. No, I want here. So let's come back into here. Let's get rid of the relief, and let's get rid of the border. There we go. So we're going to get relief, and I am going to set the background color because I want the background color to match. There we go. So what I've done here, and this is a good opportunity just to learn something, is that I accidentally copied over the code from my text widget. And you'll notice that those name parameters are transferable between text widgets, label widgets. They pass between them. Like they can be used in a lot of places. So if I save this now and give this another run, let's close what we have here. Pull this up. Let's give this a run. There it is. Enter first name. Okay, that feels good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the other ones and I'm just going to paste them in here. So I'm going to take these two, let's copy them, and there they are. So we have self-label 2, self-label 3, and they have all the same thing. We've just changed the text name parameter. And I actually don't need the width and height because, again, I was working with a text object. So let's clear that, and let's pack them. So now I'm going to come down here, and I can look at my picture. This is going to be row 1, column 0, row 2, column 0. So if I come here, as soon as I get these correct order, there it is. Let's take this, let's copy this, let's paste this twice, and we're going to say row 1, row 2, and this is going to be lab 2, label 2, and this is going to be label 3. And let's put a little enter here. And we'll save this, we'll close down our current app, and we'll give this a run, and now we have our 3 values here. So I'm hoping that you've noticed that this is almost identical to the way that we set up our tkinter with our other ones. We just have to put the word self in front of everything and put it inside this constructor. Again, what I want to stress here is that you could probably figure out the pattern in here, but it's really important you take some time to understand what is a class and what is an object. Students that I find are really successful with this is take that time at the start to understand why they're doing what they're doing. It's a little slower, but it leads to long-term success, especially when you're trying to interpret other code. All right, the next thing I want to do is I want to add our text areas. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to paste them in here as opposed to you watching me type them out. And this is where I made my typing error. I don't know why I did this before. So I have a text 1, text 2, text 3, and I use the constructor text from the tkinter module. I'm going to put it in the frame. I'm going to set the width to 30, meaning the person can enter 30 characters, the height to 1, the border width to 2, and the relief is groove, and the foreground is this. And I've done that all three. So if I come back to my picture here, I see that I want to put it in row 0, column 1, row 1, column 1, row 2, column 1. And there's a column span going on here. So let's come back into here and let's do this. So I'm going to hit enter. I like to build them, then pack them. So I'm going to say self.text1 equals tk equals text, I don't know what I'm doing, dot grid, row equals 1, row equals 0, column equals 1, and then we have what's called a column span of 2. So if we save this now, and we just kind of test this first one just to make sure we have it right, there it is. So I can type there, okay? We have 30 characters across, we have a height of 1, and a column span 2. Now the column span 2 you're not going to notice. When the column span becomes important is when we put the login button below, because then it will know to keep the login button in the middle and have this extend further. All right, let's come back in there. Let's take these and let's copy this. We're going to paste it once, paste it twice, and we're going to say, well, this is going to be text 2 and text 3, and we said row. If we look back at our diagram, we see that the column is always 1, the row goes 0, 1, 2. So we're going to come back into here. Oh, not into there, pardon me. Back into here, we're going to say row 1, row 2, and we're going to save this. We're going to give this a run, and there it is. Very nice, and now we just have to add our button. So add our button, we're going to come up here, because I'm going to build all the widgets here. I'm going to say self.btn equals tk.button. So I'm going to go into the tkinter module, access this button constructor to build a button. So I'm going to create a button object. And I'm going to say self.frame, because I'm going to put it in the frame, and the text is going to be equal to login. I'll save that. And now I need to actually put it in. So let's take a look. We see our buttons here. It's at row 3, column 1. So I'm going to click here. And so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say self.btn.grid, and we're going to put at row equals 3, column equals 1. I'm going to save this. I'm going to run this. There's our button. Now you notice the button is in our diagram, it's green, but this is white. Just be aware, when you're working with a Mac, that's what I'm programming on, tkinter button coloring doesn't seem to work very easily. I have students sometimes who get hung up on this and they spend hours trying to figure it out. Don't worry about it. We're just building a prototype here. We can just say to our client that this would be whatever color. Don't get too caught up there. All right, now I want this button to fill in the entire area, so I'm going to use another named parameter here. I'm going to use sticky equals northeast, southwest. So basically I'm going to cause the button to stick to the top, the right, the bottom, and the left. So if I save this now, and I come down here, give it a whirl, and there we go. We have this nice little login situation that we're set up with. Okay, and now we've built the exact same program, but we've just built it using a class structure, because what happens is we make an instance of app, and then app goes through and does all this. Notice I could do b equals app like this. And if I run this now, watch this. Is I run it and I get my window. There it is. But when I close it again, I get another one. And the reason why I'm getting another one is because I'm going through and constructing another object. Now students will always ask me, why don't I get both the windows at the same time? The reason we're not getting both the windows at the same time is when I construct object A, it comes up and it runs this, and then this is our main loop that kind of takes over. This is a bit more of an advanced idea. We have to run it as a thread if we want those two windows running at the same time, this isn't the right place to dive into that. So then when I close that window, this line finishes, and then it finishes creating the object, and then we create a B and we get the same window again. Okay, so in summary, this is a class structure. Classes have fields, which are variables that describe an object. They have constructors, which are special methods that we use to build an object for the first time. That is where we've built our whole GUI window. And they have what are called methods. Methods are behaviors. These are functions that are contained inside the class. When I build this, each instance will get its own root, own frame, own label 1, 2, and 3, and own text 1, 2, and 3, and own button. And so the idea is this is set up just like we would without class structure, but we just have to put the word self in front of it. And that word self says this is an instance variable of the class. I want to note this will work if you don't put the word self here, but you're going to run into some problems as we go through and develop this and we start to write some methods. By putting self here, it means that the functions that we write that are associated with this class have access to it. And with that, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find this on my GitHub repository with a link in the comments section. Have a great day.